Time to go. Welcome back to my series entitled I Did Everything Right, Got the Job, and Now am Feeling More Overwhelmed Than Ever. In this series, I will take you on my morning walks and walk you through some of the questions that I had before I started my first job as an elementary music teacher. This episode is all about stocking your classroom with the material that you will find the most helpful, by first going over what I found the most helpful, what I find overrated or I just really didn't use, and why the material I needed and that you need might actually be totally different. The first thing you need to decide that will help you know what material is right for you is what your classroom culture is going to be like. Just like we talked about last week about who you are as a teacher really showed the setup that you would need in your classroom, the type of culture you're building will show what material will be the most useful to you. Lastly, I know that each one of you taking your time to watch this video and give all your energy and focus to being the best teacher you can be is a learner. And in this career, being a constant learner and always challenging yourself to be the best teacher you can be is about the best thing you can do. All of this is going to be so important as you plan on what tools are going to help you be the best you can be. If you're someone who's not naturally organized, then a filing system that will keep you organized, a way to label things, a way to sort everything from grades to instruments to any material, no matter how random it is. I had a box dedicated to Beanie Babies. We only used them in one lesson, but it was a fun lesson. All the ways to stay organized are going to be key, because depending on your school size, the amount of paper, even if you're mostly doing digital work, can still get overwhelming. Even if you're not a naturally organized person, you can become one. Even if you were the kid whose room was a sad mess, or if when you were out sick one day in middle school, your friends took it upon yourself to clean out your locker where they found something very moldy. We still don't know what it was. We went between orange and a piece of bread, and they took it out in front of everyone, and still to this day won't let me live it down. Even though I don't think that orange or slice of bread was actually mine.
Maybe it was there from the previous owner, I don't know, but why did they choose to do it when I wasn't in school in the first place? Well, I never understood.
Point being, anybody can learn how to organize their classroom, as long as they set themselves up for success. Now, on the other hand, if you love organizing, but maybe you're having a harder time with some of the other creative side of it, what tools can you get to make the best lessons that will be fun and engaging for your students? Or maybe you're worried about not being able to think quickly on your feet. What tools can you bring into the classroom? So when that class starts taking a turn for the worse, you have something in your teacher tool belt to get them back in the right direction. We're going to be going over some of my favorite movement breaks and the tools that I use when I see a classroom dissolving into chaos.
So remember to think about who you are without including anyone else, and who you are as a student, because students know when you're being fake. So use the skills that you naturally have. It's like the scene at the opening of the movie Hitch.
Not use what you do not have. So if you're shy, be shy. If you're outgoing, be outgoing.
I'm not outgoing.
There is no one right type of teacher, but it is important to be honest and vulnerable with ourselves and be who we are.
It is so important to play to your strength and get yourself the tools that will help you be the best teacher that you can be. If you're someone who has a hard time being heard,
Then it's essential to find the right earn system for you so that you're not having to yell over your students. This is the one that we talked about in episode 1.
trust me, yelling is never a way for a teacher to gain the respect or trust of their students. And same thing with the holding up 3 fingers for quiet. There's no actual consequence for when that's not followed, and there's no earn system in place for students to have a goal that they're trying to reach is also not so helpful. If you're someone more prone to being naturally able to speak for long periods of time, where things just come to your head, but maybe those things aren't always on topic. Sorry, this one's actually a lot harder hike. But you tend to go on some longer rambles. It's so important to have a visual for yourself for when you might have been talking for a bit too long. Students, especially the younger ones, tend to tune out after 5 to 10 minutes if you haven't engaged them in some way, meaning getting them up and moving, singing, playing, or doing some sort of activity. A material you might need is a timer to hold yourself accountable and give them learning experiences, because those will always trump a lecture. Because lastly, this is something that will always be constantly changing and growing. But understanding who you are, what your passions are, and what you look forward to teaching the most is essential to know what materials you need to set yourself up for success and help you on this amazing journey that you have started. So take some time, be a little vulnerable, and think about who you want to be as a teacher. Now, it's time to know a little bit about me.
My teaching philosophy is to be a teacher who understands that movement is music, that movement is learning, and I strive to teach students in the way that I truly believe they were meant to learn.
That being said, some of the things that I found the most useful and the resources that didn't do it for me will reflect this, but might not mean that they're not right for you. The tools that I use the most in my classroom are
Number 1, the smartboard.
all of my lessons in some way, shape, or form. Even if it's just for myself to make a Google Slides presentation, to know what I did during that week, use my smartboard. It's the way that I engage my students visually, point out key concepts, the speakers that I use to get my students up and moving, the demonstrations I use so that they can actually hear what a saxophone sounds like. But before I had a smartboard, I actually had a Toby, which is really just a jankier, older version of a smartboard. If you have a Toby, awesome. Know that this will be a love-hate relationship, and that it's always important to have a backup plan. But that's true for most things. There were also times when I didn't have a smartboard or a Toby. That's when I had a projector. Having some way to engage your students visually is key. So see what you can make work for your space.
Next, I used scarves.
They are actually one of the reasons that I started my business. And I believe also one of the most underrated tools in an elementary music classroom. Ooh. No, I'm sorry. You're pretty. Kind of like pee. They are cheap, they're engaging, they're easy to clean, they're hardy, and just from one glance, your students will obviously want to touch them, which means that they have to earn them, which means you have a way to get them to meet it. To get them to meet expectations.
Number 3, the instruments that I use, because this is a music class after all.
Now this summer, I think I'm going to have a more in-depth session on some of the instruments that I have in my classroom that might not be the typical for a lot of elementary music classrooms. Because here's the thing, recorder is not a part of it. So if you're interested in some of the instruments that I have found to help to teach music literacy the best in my classroom, make sure you're liking, subscribing, and following along. Because I'll be talking about thumb pianos, actual pianos, bucket drumming, the taiko way, ukuleles, and so much more. But back to where I believe everyone should be starting, with the best of the basics.
My favorite basics that, in my mind, are great for literacy skills, steady beat practice, rhythm play-alongs, and so much more are going to be boom whackers, Orff instruments, loomy sticks, hand drums, triangles, tambourines, egg shakers, the works.
Later on, I'm going to have a video all about budgeting, funding, and getting the material you need to be able to do your job. But for right now, just keep making that list. Just a reminder that before you do any of this, check to see what you got. Usually there will always have been a teacher before you. And if they're anything like the teacher that was before me, then they'll be squirreling away all the resources they possibly can. Because music teachers tend to be very frugal, because a lot of times we need to be. So go ahead and check, make a list, and clean them really, really well. Because who knows what kind of gold you might find in your classroom.
My next favorites include colored pencils, a label maker, and popsicle sticks.
Yes, popsicle sticks. Do you know how many different rhythm patterns, ta, titi, tika tikas, your students can make and will also love to make just because they're popsicle sticks? From just this one simple tool, that's one of the cheapest things you can get, you can test your students' listening skills, analyzing skills, even some basic composing. Get the popsicle sticks. Now, if you tell a child a fact, they'll forget it in a day. But if you tell a child a story, they will remember it for life.
So naturally, that is something I have a lot of.
Later, we'll go over some of my favorite lessons to use during the first week of school. Because when I tell you that each one of them contains an amazing story that teach the fundamentals of music so beautifully, you know I'm not lying.
Leanna from the future here telling you that I already have one of my favorite back to school lesson plans just posted on my YouTube channel, so go ahead and check that out. But this summer, I will be posting so many more.
Lastly, make sure you're grabbing yourself some classroom candy, which are materials that are out, and use them as goals for your students to reach towards. Because all of the instruments that we talked about should only be handed out if your students are showing that they're meeting expectation. And I'll have another video on how I personally do that later on, because even the basic instruments are great incentives shown off in your music room as something for your older students to work towards. Great classroom candy.
Another great classroom candy is the parachute for my classroom. My students can always see it, therefore they know that they can always work towards earning it.
I'm going to be doing my absolute best to answer any questions that you might have, so make sure you drop them in the comments below. Remember, there isn't one mold for the perfect teacher, but knowing who you aspire to be and surrounding yourself with the tools and the materials to get that done is going to be essential. as well as making a seating chart. Remember, it's free. It will help you learn names, maintain classroom behavior, set high expectations, and so much more. Have you done it yet? Start doing it. What are you waiting for? Reminder, none of this should be coming from your personal money. We're going to talk later on about budgeting and getting the funding that you need. And now on the other side of that, it's also important to remember that some of the videos that you're watching of teachers making their own classroom is not something that you should be comparing yourself to. We don't know how long that teacher has spent gathering those materials and squirreling them away, or what their classroom priorities are. The best thing you can do is focus on yourself, making your classroom or your space or your cart a welcoming site for your student, and filling it with music and lessons that will help create lifelong musicians. I think we're done. And now it's time for my favorite part.
Yes.
It's gonna be a good day. See you next time. Ooh, nice job, baby.